You're listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.
This episode.
There's a brand new owner in FAB Facts.
It's a very special someone's very special day in the Randomiser.
And Jamie welcomes a composer of some notes. It's Richard Harvey.
Oh, very droll. That's all coming up in Pod 141
of the Gerry Anderson Podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get started. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Gerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
Gerry Anderson Podcast number 141 of 10,312.
What? What? Really? Is that what you're expecting from me?
No, I don't know how far we're going to get, but
Wow.
141's pretty good going. And despite the fact that we've been doing it all that time, I remain Jamie Anderson, and you might remain being...
And always will be Richard N. James.
Now, Chris Dale will also be joining us later, but at the moment, I believe... He's having a piloting lesson to get his provisional eagle flying license back after a recent incident.
Oh, there he goes. Yes. Hi, Chris. Hi.
God, yeah,
Wow.
I'm not sure you can see you waving. I don't know what the downward look is on the eagle cockpit. Anyway, he'll be back later with the randomizer. But what else have we got that's non-Chris Dale related coming up?
Well, you say the Gerry Anderson Podcast, so one would make a reasonable assumption that it's going to be all about Gerry Anderson. And that, in as far as it's true, would be true. However, it's about so much more than that. It's also about our lovely listeners, the Podsterons, who have been emailing us in at podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk and joining in on our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Podsterons, and also heading on over to Twitter and hashtagging us Gerry Anderson Podcast. It's also all about FAB Facts, whereby we'll flick through a book of random facts, pick one to talk about, and have many a jape besides. It's also about our wonderful guests, and this week, Jamie, you've been talking to Richard Harvey.
I have indeed, a name that many of you prog rockers will know of from his Gryphon days.
Yes, and also, as if that wasn't enough, it's all about the news, which will be coming up a bit later on, and also, it's all about Chris Dale's amazing randomizer.
Absolutely, when he's back from his lesson in the Eagle, but I'm sure he'll do a beautiful job there.
Of course he will.
Now, Richard James.
Yes.
I'm very excited about chatting to Richard Harvey, and it's going to be a 3-parter, would you believe?
Wow. Great. Fantastic.
There's just so much to cover there.
Give us a brief overview then. Like what?
Richard's life and career, obviously. Particularly how he came to meet Dad and how he came to work on Terrahawks and the process there. And by part 3, we even talk about how we put the Firestorm theme together, which is rather cool.
Oh, yes.
So
great.
Lots to look forward to there.
Yeah, lovely.
But before we get to any of that good stuff...
Yeah, before we get to any of that good stuff, Jamie, I went on our Facebook group just before we started recording and said, look, we're going to be recording a podcast this afternoon, so do you have any questions or anything you would like me to tell Jamie? So I've got a few here for you, Jamie. Jonathan Westall, for example, said, what's the latest on the CDs of First Action Bureau Series 1? When are we going to receive them?
Very soon. Actually, they're about to come out of the pressing plant any minute, so possibly even arriving at the warehouse this week, I would guess.
Great. Rob Doyle asks, when is the next Space 1999 disc out?
Also very soon, probably in the next fortnight.
What? It's all going on, isn't it?
I know.
Tom Hodden asks, whatever happened to the Candy and Andy dolls? Please don't tell me they're still out there.
Was that ever going to... Oh, yeah, actually, sorry, I thought you meant we were going to produce some. I mean, I don't know. I feel like they probably crossed over into a Doctor Who episode with an Ernestine consciousness.
Oh, yes, that's right. Hugh Bourne asks, do you eat chocolate digestive biscuits with the chocolate side up or down?
Up.
Oh. And then Tom Hodden posted, what should we definitely not ask Jamie? And suggestions included, what's that strange cheesy smell?
Oh.
Are we watching Joe 90 tonight?
No.
And why did Jamie laugh so much after the line last week about there being so many talented actors in Space Precinct and Richard James?
No comment.
Really? Anyway, there we are. Just a few questions to get us started. Come on, let's get on with Fab Facts.
Okay. Here we go.
Now, time for this week's Fab Facts.
Fab Facts is that part of the show where I have a book of Fab Facts, I flick through it, Richard shouts Fab at a random point while I'm flicking through the pages, and when he does, I stop flicking, and on the page that we land on, quite randomly, I will find a Fab Fact and read it out to you. How does that sound, Richard James?
All of that is true.
Okay, so you wouldn't say you're excited, but you would say that statement was at least accurate.
Exactly, I would vouch for its veracity, but not my excitement.
Okay, fine. Well then here comes a veritable Fab Fact.
Go on. Fab!
Ooh. 1969, a fine vintage for...
Well, I should say so.
Well,
yeah,
actually not the finest vintage of the Supermarionation, you might say, because it's from the era of the Secret Service.
Yeah. Much loved by some.
Much loved, absolutely. And one of the most loved parts of that was a vehicle not a Derek Meddings classic, you might say, but instead Father Unwin's prized roadster, the 1917 Model T Ford Gabriel.
Lovely.
Now, Gabriel had a rather interesting afterlife after production wrapped on the Secret Service. UFO fans may well have spotted it in the very first episode of the show, Identified, where it was seen parked outside Harlington Straker Studios. Mm-hmm. It also turned up in another UFO episode, A Question of Priorities, where Ed Straker is seen driving himself and his son Johnny around the remains of the Wild West town from the Prisoner episode Living in Harmony. A lot of crossover stuff going on here.
Yeah, isn't there?
But what happened then? Well, at some point after that, the car, which had been the property of Century 21 since they bought it for the Secret Service, got a new owner.
Right.
According to a certain Mr. Gerald Alexander Anderson, also known as Gerry Anderson, or Dad to me, when he was asked about the car in 2010, he recalled that Lou Grade once mentioned how his wife had loved the car. And so Dad gave it to the Grades as a thank you for the support that Lou had given him over the years.
What? Well, I mean, I remember telling your dad how much I liked the police cruiser from Space Precinct. He didn't give me that.
Not roadworthy, though, that's the problem, or skyworthy. Now,
fair enough.
After it went to the Grades, at some point, I don't know whether it was before Lou's death or after, it went somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that went to Mr. Charles Bussey of Bussey's Motorcars.
Right.
And Bussey's Motorcars had it in their showroom for a very long time and actually very kindly brought it along to Andercon in 2014. So if you went to Andercon at Heathrow, you will probably remember it being inside the venue where it was parked up there. That was the original Model T Ford. I believe it is still owned by Bussey's Motorcars. So
it's still out there.
Yeah, I think it's still on display in a window. It's very niche, isn't it? Very, a bit of an unusual one. Maybe people will think it's Bessie, possibly from Doctor Who.
I bet they would. Yes, of course they would. Yeah.
So there you go. That's an interesting little history for that car, isn't it? That
now, I don't remember it being at Andercon.
Do you not?
No.
It was
I'm
definitely
just trying to
there.
walk through the venue, but you see, that was very early days for me, Jamie, and maybe I really didn't know what I was looking at.
I know you 2014. Thought, who's parked their motor car in here? It's a bit retro.
Right. That's right. No, I'd just sort of taken the plunge back into all things Gerry Anderson after a bit of a hiatus. So maybe it just didn't register with me. I certainly remember Fab 1 being outside.
Yeah, Fab 1 was outside. Well, I'll try and find some pictures from the event.
Lovely. Yeah, great.
And if you were there and you got an event with Gabriel, then do email us with your photograph at podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk.
If nothing else, to jog my memory.
Yes, that is the main reason we do everything on this podcast, Richard James.
And you are?
I'll send you an email with a photograph to prove who I am. But until I do that, that brings us very neatly to the end of this week's
Gabriel Fact.
I hesitated because I thought you might have gone for Ford Fact, you see. But
I see.
No, Gabriel Fact's great, and I love your rendition. So let's not go over old ground there. Nice job, Richard James.
Really?
So,
right, thank you very much.
So what else? What else is coming up now?
Now, as we would ordinarily expect, the Podsterons have been getting in touch in their droves at podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. So I thought I'd just read out a few emails. This one's from Steve, who says, "Hi chaps, here's a couple of questions for you, Jamie. Now, did your dad prefer to eat a meal at home, in a restaurant, or have a takeaway? Did you get to go to any fancy restaurants for business meals?" And leading on from this, if you went out with your dad, did he ever get recognised in the street? I expect Richard constantly gets recognised, but he doesn't like to brag about it. All the best, podcast regular listener and Podder's Arms client, Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he did like to eat at home.
Okay.
And if he was feeling in particular need of a treat, his treat to himself was, believe it or not, noodles cooked in chicken stock.
Right.
That was it. And
Really?
he would then consume this whole bowl of noodles and slurp up the chicken stock, and that was his kind of go-to comfort food, strangely.
Well.
But equally, he absolutely loved Chinese food. And there used to be a Chinese restaurant in Henley-on-Thames called the Chef Peking. It was managed by a lovely man called Steve. And that was a regular haunt. And Dad would occasionally be recognised there.
Yes. And how did he take to that? Was he all right with being recognised? Patient?
It was fairly rare, but he was okay with it. A bit embarrassed in a sort of very British way, and he certainly didn't make a big thing of it, and sort of wanted it to be over as quickly as possible. So there you go. That was one of his main things. And what else did we do? Just a pub meal. There was a pub called the Crown near the family home that we used to go to all the time.
Right.
Now residential. And in terms of posh places, when they were making Lavender Castle, I think I may have recalled this on the interview with Chris Bowden way back when. Maybe they didn't make the edit, I can't remember. But we used to go out with the exec producer Craig Hemmings, and we used to go to a restaurant called the Belle Epoque I think it was in Manchester. And it was lovely and a bit fancy.
Oh.
And there you go.
Right.
How's that? There's a full set of things.
Yeah, as fascinating as it is, let's move on to another email from
This
Erin.
is the Gerry Anderson Podcast, so those are extremely relevant and possibly fascinating, I'll have you know.
True enough. Erin says, hi, Richard, Jamie and Chris. And she urges us to put those in order of our own preference. She says, despite the ban on limericks previously issued on the podcast, I was hoping an exception could be made. Considering the negative limericks previously supplied, I thought I'd have a go at something a bit more positive. So here you go. There once was a man called Gerry who made loads of great telly, bringing laughter and tears over so many years, and now we celebrate his legacy.
Oh, okay.
She says, I realise the last rhyme is a bit dodgy, but I was still quite proud nonetheless. Keep up the good work. Despite other limericks, the podcast is still interesting and fun every week.
Okay.
Every week?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Some
She says, I'm also especially looking forward to the next series of First Action Bureau. I would admit to being rather annoyed at the cliffhanger ending, then delighted at the announcement which immediately followed. FAB, Erin. Yes. How's that going, Jamie? Any further news on the writing of or the development of the second series of
Not
First
a lot
Action Bureau?
I can tell you right now, it's an extremely busy time currently.
Yep.
There's all sorts of good stuff going on and announcements coming soon.
Yeah.
It's progressing along quite nicely. There's some really cool bits to come and some lovely bits of challenging sound design for poor Ian Meadows, who's probably going to have to, at some point, find some fruit to surgically operate on to get the Foley for some of the stuff. There you go.
Fantastic.
There's a gross hint.
That's brilliant. A couple of emails on the subject of FAB grandparenting that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. Emma says, hi, Jamie, Richard, Chris, and fellow Podsterons. I remember watching Thunderbirds with my grandparents when they were around. Sadly, they passed on, but I remember my grandpa saying as we watched the episode Terror in New York City, I'd have Thunderbird 2 in the hangar, strip it back, rebuild it, and out in a day.
All right, you show off.
She said, I didn't know what to say, but there was a reason why he said that. He was an engineer in the RAF, and I think that's why I love Thunderbird so much, and that's from Emma. Hannah got in touch again to say, hello, Rich and Jamie, how you doing? I hope you're not snowed in. Well, we're not anymore, Hannah. I'm still listening to the podcasts every week, she says, from beginning to end.
Wow.
It's very brave. I'd like to share with you some fab grandparenting I had from my granddad when I was a kid. My memories are not very clear, but it must have been around the year 2000. I went to see what my granddad was up to in the living room and found that he was watching something I'd never seen before. I'm afraid I can't remember which episode it was, but that moment was my first view of Thunderbirds. Later, I found him watching the same show again. I think it was the last half an hour of Sun Probe, and I thought I'll just sit down and watch it with him, having absolutely no idea of what I was watching and that it would still be a part of me much later on. So it's not just Gerry that I thank, but also my granddad for introducing me to Gerry Anderson in the first place.
Lovely.
Yes. And finally, a question from Nathan in Leicester. Now, Nathan says, hi, gents. I was wondering if you could shed any light on the subject of episode runtimes. While at its core, Captain Scarlet is my favourite Anderson series for its concept, atmosphere and themes, I would say that overall Thunderbirds had the superior writing and pacing, and I think that this is mostly down to episodes lasting 50 minutes rather than 25. My understanding, says Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the 50-minute runtime was thrust at the Thunderbirds writers at short notice by the commercial powers that be. But I think in the end, this really allowed the stories to build and breathe, such as, for instance, the multiple failed rescue attempts of the US Army of the Sidewinder crew in Pit of Peril. Even a scene that may have been considered as padding, like a slow pan of the Thompson Tower to ominous music in City of Fire, added wildly to the impending doom. So, my question is, why did they revert back to 25 minutes for Captain Scarlet when its creeping noir dread could have suited it perfectly being 50 minutes? When Scarlet worked, it was perfect. Big Ben strikes again, Operation Time, but there's a fair few episodes that to me feel truncated to fit the time limit. Was this a conscious preference, or was it ultimately a decision out of the hands of Gerry and co? And Nathan says, love the show, Steve. Nathan. Little reference to Steve Right in the Afternoon, I think they're on
Thanks,
Radio
Steve.
2. Yeah. Here in the UK. Yeah, interesting question.
I have a theory and probable likely answer for you on this.
Oh, go on.
So, as Dad told the story many times, he showed Lou the first episode of Thunderbirds, which at that point was only 25 minutes long. Lou did his famous, this isn't a television series, this is a feature film thing, you have to make it extra length, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Now, Thunderbirds was very successful in the UK and Australia and some other territories, but it didn't sell in the US. And I suspect that when it came to the next series, Lou thought, right, well, I've got to try and, get this next thing to sell internationally because that's the way to make the real money and to make sure that these things can carry on happening.
Yeah.
So, having had Lou decide to have these extended episode lengths, and then Thunderbirds not selling, I suspect strongly that he went, well, perhaps one of the reasons is because we've gone for an unusual length of episode, and that doesn't fit with commercial broadcast in the United States.
Yep.
So we'll have to flip back to 25 minutes. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think it was almost certainly a commercial consideration and a sort of going back on his original theory that these longer, grander episodes would work better for the audience. I don't think Captain Scarlet sold at all in the US, really. Certainly worse than Thunderbirds. So I don't think it was just down to the episode length being an issue. But there you go. That's most likely why. I'm always happy to be corrected if someone has a direct quote from elsewhere or knows better. But that's my theory and expectation of why that happened.
Very good. Great. There you go, Nathan. So do get in touch with us, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk for any thoughts, comments. What do you think of the podcast? What's your favourite Gerry Anderson series? What do you think of Jamie? Let us know. podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. I'll read out your emails next time.
Yes, and there's no need for you to email in to tell me what you think of me, Richard. I know already.
I think I've made that quite clear.
You have. Right, before we get into that in any depth, I think we should avoid it at all costs. So let's have some Gerry Anderson news instead.
Oh, yes!
I'm having this one. Newsy news. Ha ha ha. It's the Gerry Anderson news, and here is this week's news.
So unfair.
So for this week's Gerry Anderson news, let's start off with First Action Bureau. Yes, Richard, we know you're in First Action Bureau, like Space Precinct. But finally, the CD Collector's Edition is here.
Oh, yes.
It's arrived, it's in stock, and it's good to go. It's shipping out, so if you pre-ordered it, I'm very, very sorry for the delay. You can blame COVID, Brexit, and probably me as well. But it's finally in. It's shipping. It's 3 CDs. The third CD is a full making of, music suite, all sorts of behind-the-scenes stuff. And the main Series 1 is edited into a kind of feature-length edition across CDs 1 and 2. So well worth grabbing. If you are more of a classic Anderson fan and you fancy some Eagles to add to your collection, then can I strongly suggest that you head over to the Gerry Anderson store and check out the 1612 5-inch collectible Eagles that are up for pre-order now. They're coming out later this year. They'll be shipping in September or October, but we're pretty sure they're going to pre-sell out. It's quite a strange modern concept, isn't it? But that's what happens these days. There are 4 different variants and also a rather snazzy electronic launch pad, all limited edition. Go across and just search Eagle on the Gerry Anderson store, or go to ander.sn, that's ANDR.SN/Eagles, and you'll find the full collection there.
Look forward to it.
Now I'm going to drop a little hint here. Save the date, 14th of April, 2021. Now I know lots of you will be working, so there'll be stuff going on in the evening on the 14th of April and probably all day, and some things that might be worth paying attention to.
Ooh.
I shall say no more for now, but you should definitely keep an eye there. And finally, Space 1999, Volume 1 audio series, the special edition, will be coming to the Gerry Anderson store very soon. You can still pre-order it. Mm-hmm. It is sounding fantastic, and if you haven't heard the trailer yet, here it is.
From Big Finish Productions, Space 1999, Volume 1.
Moonbase Alpha? Moonbase Alpha, are you there?
We cannot abandon hope of returning to Earth.
Was I right, Professor? Was someone watching us from Meta?
You're suggesting the moon was deliberately taken out of Earth's orbit? That's a spacecraft.
It's small. I almost missed it. Take cover!
This is Moonbase Alpha.
My intentions are peaceful.
Simmons, get down!
I gave them a secret code.
I had to lift off before my eagle was buried in snow and ice.
I think your people should join us.
Imagine that, being able to set our own course for once.
Smell that fresh air.
It may be brand new to us, but it's probably been here a few million years or so, and we don't know a thing about it.
Look out!
Stop! What do you think you're...
Humanity's dream of immortality.
I'm going to take their nuclear core to power this ship into deep space.
Stop! Now you see I mean it. Would you look at that?
Are we about to have humankind's first contact with aliens?
Big Finish. We love stories.
Oh,
lovely.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. Such a great combination of kind of contemporary and retro stuff. All the lovely classic sound effects in there. What a cast. What a team. I mean, I would say that obviously because I was executive story consultant on there, but that is a fancy term for not doing very much at all. It's a great team who's done a fantastic job. Coming very soon, and the special edition features an extra behind-the-scenes download. More on that very soon, and some photos, a little photo archive from the Gerry Anderson photo collection from Dad's personal archive. So well worth grabbing there. Right, that's it, I think, for this week's Gerry Anderson News.
That was the news! That was the news!
And very good news it was too.
Well, wasn't it just? I'm tempted to offer a prize to the person, the listener, who can tell me in which pod did I first sing the outgoing end theme to the Gerry Anderson News.
Yeah, I've got no idea, so I'm not winning the prize. I can't remember.
Well, I'll save that for another day.
Okay, good. Probably for the best, isn't it?
You're listening to the Gerry Anderson Podcast. Of course you are, because that's what you wanted to do, and here we are bringing it to you right now. Now, the best thing you can do for us is to simply subscribe to us on whichever platform you're listening to us on, and that way you'll be sure of listening to every new episode the moment that it drops, as they say. Also, of course, you can leave us a nice rating and share us with your friends so they can listen too. Now, over on our Facebook group, Jamie, it's all been kicking off.
Oh, no,
this
really?
This is at facebook.com, no, in a good way, /Podsterons, /groups/Podsterons, but you know that right. Anyway. For example, Hannah has been sharing her wonderful art, Stephen has been showing off his XL5 t-shirt, and Matty Kescavari has noticed that Doppelganger might be getting a Blu-ray release in March.
What might be? Say that again.
Doppelganger.
It's already had a Blu-ray release.
Right, Mark Perkins posted this. Barry Gray's use of electronic music was pioneering in the 60s, but I don't feel that he gets the plaudits for this, because at the same time he was also writing such bangers as the Thunderbirds theme tune. One of my favourites is the tune used in The Mighty Atom. It could easily be straight out of the Radiophonic Workshop at that time, and I've only just noticed this diagram, and he posted a picture behind the professor's head just before the Hood steals the mouse. Great attention to detail in an episode I remember vividly when I first saw it in the 60s. Amazing how long these things stay with you, isn't it? These vivid images or scenes from programmes you saw 50 years ago.
Yeah, well, and particularly sounds. I think, the sounds are such a huge part, the music and the voices as well, It's it's amazing how you couldn't think of cutting to Tracy Island and the musical cue that would come with that. And it's sort of, I don't know, a lot of people can hear it in their mind's ear so clearly. It's like they were watching the episode. Amazing.
Yes. Callum Parkin commented, I also think Barry Gray is one of the few, possibly only people to make the Hammond organ sound cool. For example, the Joe 90 and UFO themes. Mitchell Ackhurst says, if you ask me, there's a little bit of Gerry Anderson DNA in the Mass Effect series, which I think is a computer game, isn't it? From the retro space opera of Fireball XL5 to the slightly marionette-like animations, even the menace of the Mysterons. Do you think maybe an Anderson-verse RPG could work in this style?
Oh, cool. Could do. That sounds like quite some undertaking,
doesn't it? Tim Boys says 180. This is going back to our plea for anyone to send us in details of a professional darts player who also enjoyed Gerry Anderson to come on and be interviewed for our 180th podcast, which is still some time away. But Tim says somewhere there's a Fireball XL5 comic strip with a giant dartboard. Earth was having missiles fired in its direction, but Steve finds out that it's two planets just practicing their aim. So Steve gets a giant dartboard and sends it into space. Has anyone got this strip or remember it?
I mean, it sounds like something you've made up.
Yeah, it does a bit. I'm sure that's not
all
the case.
Stories are made up, so that makes sense, doesn't it?
And finally, you'll be delighted about this, Jamie.
Yes, go on.
Because Tom Hodden has given me a rather special. Yes, it's Quickfire 5 from Tom Hodden via our Facebook
got
group.
Away with that.
No, are you ready for these, Jamie?
No.
Who do you go for a meal with, Mitch or Torchy?
Oh, what?
Bearing in mind that they choose the venue and the music.
I mean, that's horrific. Mitch.
Oh, who sings for your wedding, Cliff Richards Jr. or Tex Tucker?
Tex, right.
Yeah, lovely. 3, you're stuck in an elevator with no escape, Candy and Andy, or Dragon's Domain Monster?
I reckon I could take down Candy and Andy, so we'll go with that.
Oh, you think so? Would you rather fly Thunderbird 2, but with it could be anywhere on an island on a constant loop, or drive Fab 1 with Zelda in the passenger seat?
Oh, she'd be Bants, as they say. So Zelda all the way.
And finally, it's your birthday, so who arranges the office party? Brains or Neinstein?
Oh, Brains. Absolutely, every time.
Yeah. Yes, that'd be great. Well done. There you go. A very quick Quickfire 5, courtesy of Tom Hodden on our Facebook group.
Thanks, Tom Hodden. I really mean that.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Right, is that enough torture for me for now?
I think you're good to go.
Good. Okay, well, I need a break after that Quickfire 5, so I think we should go to our feature.
Oh, yeah.
What do you reckon to that?
Yeah, go on then.
Fine. Well, it's Richard Harvey, famous composer, musician, musical director, and all-round nice chap. I have a fantastic intro here going over all of his awards. Would you like to hear it?
Oh, go on. Yes, please.
Richard Harvey is a BAFTA award winner, a composer, a conductor, and a virtuoso multi-instrumentalist. You try and say that after a few beers. In addition to his considerable achievements in classical music, Richard has written music for over 80 films and television series, was a founding member of the folk/prog rock band Gryphon, and has performed, arranged or conducted for such major releases as The Lion King, Interstellar and The Da Vinci Code. But to Gerry Anderson fans, of course, he will be best known for composing and performing the soundtrack to Terrahawks and the main titles to Firestorm.
Nice.
There you go. What an intro.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's almost like we've got a professional writing the script this week. Say no more. Thank you very much, Ben, for doing that. Yep. Anyway, without further ado, and because there are no more words to say on the script, let's have Richard Harvey Part 1.
Hello, I'm Richard Harvey. I'm a composer of some notes, maybe not of note, and born a long time ago in North London, now a habitué of South London, and a one-time proud friend and colleague of no less a person than Gerry Anderson, and I currently have the pleasure of engaging in a discourse with his son, Jamie.
What a lovely and hilarious intro. Thanks, Richard. You set the bar high for this one. We will touch on working together later on. And obviously, we're going to cover the period of your career working with Dad and other thoughts. But it's always nice to know where people began their careers and how you got onto the path of being a composer of some notes. So how and why did that happen? What's your comic book origin story?
Well, it doesn't get very comic for a while, actually. My father moved from New Zealand to London just after the Second World War, and his intention was to study music at Trinity College, London, which he did. He was a talented composer and also played the flute and the piano. He met my mother shortly thereafter. She was from a Welsh family, the Lloyds of Llangollen, and her dad was a very good singer. I mean, barbershop quartet, Welsh tenor type. So although my mother was never a musician, she had some music in her blood. And, my family moved around London quite a bit. And my father was a teacher for a while and then gave that up and took up law. Became a lowly Dickensian solicitor's clerk, toiling away in the basement doing, divorces and house conveyancing and stuff. But, his evenings and his weekends were all music, either listening to Radio 3 or playing the piano or composing at the piano. So there was always a piano, the sound of a piano and the sound of music in my house, wherever we were. And, his interface with the piano was very much a composer's interface with the piano. So pretty much he sat at the piano and started improvising. I think he even did, like I understand the great Barry Gray himself, a little bit of hotel piano playing, which is something which I don't have on my CV. I don't think they want my piano playing in a hotel foyer, frankly. Anyway, so music was the sort of, the atmosphere of my childhood. And although my father was always keen to encourage me, he never forced me into music at all. But I guess, round about, I have to say that the whole Anderson supermarionation thing was, I know this is a cliche, but it was kind of the soundtrack of my early youth. I mean, Supercar was the first thing. No, actually, not the first thing. I do remember Four Feather Falls, just about. And the whole world was in black and white at that point. So it kind of didn't look weird, really. We'd not long owned a television at that point, and the screen was only about 4 inches across. So, it must have seemed HD at that size. But no, I mean, it was Supercar that first got me. And I, of course, got the model of the car, which flew into every bit of airspace around our house. So I would have been 7 then. Mm. And then, Fireball XL5, I would have been 8 and 9. And, I think was Stingray the first one in colour?
Was indeed, yeah.
Yeah. That was very good because it had sex appeal on a level that the other ones, and, a bit early, age 10 to 11. But, Thunderbirds at that point it became a real team game.
Mm.
And also one instinctively knew the Barry Gray style.
Oh, yeah.
Thunderbirds happened just at the time that I was engaging properly with music.
Ah.
Having my first, one-to-one music lessons. I'd played in the school recorder group, I'd sung in a group and that sort of thing. But Thunderbirds was exactly at the time that I was actually picking up instruments and learning to play them. So, the timing couldn't have been better, really. So I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to be talking. I mean, at that age, there were only a handful of things that meant anything to me. I didn't follow any sport. I mean, I knew who Tottenham Hotspur were and who Jim Trees and Danny Blanchflower were, but I mean, for me, there was, a supercar, Stingray, Thunderbirds. There was the Beatles. There was the Shadows. And a tiny bit later, there was Doctor Who. And those were the only things that really meant anything to me at all. And, my week would be planned around those things. And they were all family events, apart from the music that one listened to in one's own time.
Yeah.
But also those were the days of, the start of the sort of white heat of the technology revolution, which your dad came to sort of own in popular culture terms.
Yeah, very much so.
He was the high priest of, creative future technology. And, big influence on everybody of my age. And, I remember my brother dissecting an old mono gramophone, having just undergone an upgrade to stereo. And he took the electric motor out of this gramophone and he used bits of Meccano to make his curtains open and close electrically. I mean, it was a complete failure because the cable just fell off the Meccano wheel every time he tried to use it. But it was the sort of, the Telstar, Thunderbirds, early days of every, press a button to get a coffee, flashing lights, that sort of thing. And so he had to have electric curtains. And, for me, it was Airfix kits and Meccano, to a lesser extent, Scale Electric, but all that sort of thing. That all happened at the same time. There was a zeitgeist round the whole thing. And it fairly hard to imagine growing up in any other way.
Yeah.
Frankly, this makes me sound like an old fart, I know, but when I look at what technology is giving us now and what it gave us then, I'd rather grow up in that time than this time. Should I ever grow up?
It's never going to happen. But the way you describe it all sounds kind of colourful and stimulating in a practical way that you don't get now because of technology being the predominant force and everything being through a screen. But you're talking about Meccano and taking things apart and
it's more tactile.
Absolutely.
Experience, yeah. And I think all that helps kind of sire a generation of great British inventors and engineers.
And composers.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, it certainly made you aware of music. I can also there's not a world of difference between. I mean, let's just think about Barry Gray for a second. I mean, his career was Gerry Anderson.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I mean, he did very little outside the sphere of Gerry Anderson's work, and you could say, well, that was fine. He didn't need to. I mean, it made him very, very rich, and it gave him a very culturally rich canvas on which to paint his musical ideas. But in truth, he wasn't that far away from the best Hollywood film composers at that time, which is amazing considering he's a Brit.
Yeah.
If you look, I mean, yes, there were plenty of British classical composers who had a go at scoring films. Hardly ever TV series, actually, because that really hadn't developed yet. So Thunderbirds was ahead of the game on that one as well. And what he did wasn't that different from what you'd hear in a sort of, a war movie, particularly one involving airplanes and dogfights and that sort of thing. But one wouldn't really have been aware of that. What really hit the whole thing on the nose, as far as Barry Gray and Thunderbirds was concerned, was all those set pieces. Because although one could say, oh, well, they only got 20 odd minutes of material per episode, because they had at least 5 or 6 minutes of stop launches and returns to base and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But actually, as a fan, those were something you look forward to, and you got a thrill every time one of those started up. So they weren't ever regarded as fillers, because they were also fantastic musical moments. And I guess, you never got that in a movie. And you barely got it in any other form of television. The only repeated music was the opening and closing credits, which, some you would be aware of, and they did their job of sort of pulling you out of the kitchen into the living room when your program was starting. But, that whole concept made one incredibly aware of the music. And of course, it bore a huge amount of scrutiny because it was so good.
Yes.
It was not only very good, it was very well played and very well recorded. Where were we? Yeah. So, I guess that one of the reasons I would have become an orchestral musician was the way orchestra was used in Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
So, a big influence. And by the time Thunderbirds had gone, I was just about, I was at grammar school by then. I was well into learning instruments, getting involved in music. And not long after that, I ended up at music college, and I was set off on, the inevitable career.
Yeah.
And for a long time, didn't listen to much pop music or watch much television. I'm just too busy being out. And so it all happened at the perfect time. I would have hated to miss Thunderbird.
Yeah. Imagine
just on account of being out and about.
How different your life might have been if you hadn't had that early Barry Gray influence, Richard. So the school to music college time, what instruments were you learning and playing, and what were your influences across that time? Because that's obviously pretty crucial to where you went for the rest of your career. So, what was your focus then?
Well, there were loads of things happening. The 60s were an incredibly fertile time, and it wasn't just, the dawn of British pop and Merseybeat and so on. It was also the start of the early music revival and the folk music revival, with George Harrison and Yehudi Menuhin. We all started to hear Indian music for the first time. And so suddenly there was loads of stuff out there. And for someone like myself who just wants a bit of everything and can never make his mind up, there was rich pickings out there. And, to this day, I've never made up my mind what it is I want to do. And those were great days for not having made up your mind. The only thing I was a little bit pushed back onto my heels when music started to get sort of too aggressive, too druggy. I sort of didn't even like it when the Beatles went a bit, off the rails, as it were. It wasn't off the rails. You can see how cute it all was in retrospect. Yeah. But the fact that I was pursuing, what was becoming an inevitable classical music career, yet with a, collection of Beatles and Shadows and so on albums, meant that, I hadn't bypassed that thing. I was already aware of film music and, starting to be aware of all sorts of other stuff too. And I think there was a little gap. I set off, I sort of more or less tossed a coin and chose the clarinet. What my dad did actually was a stroke of genius, because my parents weren't very well off and they couldn't afford to. If I'd had my way, I'd have had them buy about 25 instruments for me. But they could only, I think I had a couple of recorders and a clarinet in the end. So my dad was always very kind of taking me to music shops, and he'd sit there patiently for hours while I tried all these different instruments. And in the end, he got me a job with Potter's Music in Kingston. And it was a weekend job, and I'd go in there and help out. You know, they taught me how to restring a violin bow, rehair a violin bow, put new reeds on clarinets and saxophones and that sort of thing. But of course, during the quiet times, I could just pick up any instrument I wanted and play it. And, I could see that there were advantages over, say, the clarinet, rather than, for me, the oboe at that time. The oboe, you need to fuss with the reed the whole time. You only need to pick it up wrong and the keywork breaks, whereas the clarinet, you can pretty much throw it around the room.
More robust.
And it'll still work. Yeah, you just, you take the reed off, dip it in a glass of water or give it a little suck, and within seconds you got a sound coming out of it. So I thought that'll do. And I'd been playing the recorder. Fingering was fairly similar, so I went for that. I started doing Saturday mornings at the Royal College of Music, which then led to me going to the Royal College of Music full time. That was I guess very end of the 60s, I was junior Royal College of Music. Just at the beginning of the 70s, I was senior Royal College of Music. Royal College of Music is in Kensington, up the road from Chelsea and Fulham and so on. A lot of distractions. And my music college career was cut short by all those distractions.
Interesting.
One of which was professional work, because even though I was studying the clarinet and a bit of composition and piano and a couple of other things, I still carried on with my love of early music. So I'd kept playing the recorder, but I'd added all sorts of other weird instruments to that. And I'd met a couple of people who were professionally involved in early music. And of course, around about that time, there was the BBC were getting really prolific with historic drama. Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I, all that sort of stuff. So I kept getting calls, would I play on sessions for, Six Wives of Henry VIII, or would I would I go and stand there in tights on the set of Elizabeth R. And so you're not allowed to stay at the Royal College of Music, or in those days you weren't allowed to stay at the Royal College of Music if you were doing professional work. You could get written permission for the occasional foray out into the professional world. But it was happening to me all the time. And there were sort of 2 or 3 of us there who were getting offers of professional work. I mean, I would have been just about 20 at that time.
Yeah.
No, 19. Well, yeah. Would have been just about 19. And the 2 or 3 others who were being offered professional work still are stalwarts of the London session scene. So it was unbroken.
Yeah.
Exactly 50 years of non-stop work for myself, fortunately, thank God, and that handful of other people who got thrown out as well. Well, we weren't thrown out. We were invited to consider our options.
Excellent phrase.
And ascertain what our priorities might have been at that stage. I mean, my mum said to me, "Look, you've got to take your exams because you've been there on a grant from the council, and you'll have to pay that back if you don't graduate." So, I scraped through my graduation a year early, which would have been quite an expensive moment if that hadn't worked out. But, shortly after leaving, I was getting involved in more early music, film sessions. I was really excited by film sessions. And, I even did the odd thing on stage, and, I've been talking about theatre music and so on. And the idea of sort of dressing like a waiter and sitting at the back of an orchestra for the rest of my life was losing some of its appeal. by that stage. Yeah, so it was all long hair, Afghan coats, and associated joys.
Yeah.
Plenty of work, lots of late nights. I won't say the rest is history because it still could have gone in any direction. And I formed a band called Gryphon while I was still at college. And we played in folk clubs and pubs and all sorts. And we got discovered by a folk label called Transatlantic Records. They wanted to record all our repertoire, which there wasn't much of it, and not just about enough to fill an album. We made this album, and it got noticed. Transatlantic had just taken on a very bright young public relations officer who they'd sprung out of Warner Records. And he got us onto Radio 1, 2, 3, and 4 all in the same week.
Wow.
And he said, as far as he's aware, no band has ever achieved that. Well, we didn't achieve it. He achieved it. I suppose we achieved it in the sense that we gave him the raw material. We got noticed by Peter Hall, as he then was, later Sir Peter Hall, of the National Theatre. And he said, would you guys be able to provide the music for my 1973 production of The Tempest at the Old Vic? We said, yeah, love to. No idea what we were getting ourselves into. And, our band were notable for several things, multi-instrumental skills, a bit of general virtuosity, good humour, good sense of humour on stage, and really chronic laziness. So when the time came to write something, have you done anything? No, I thought you were doing that. Well, I haven't done anything. What about you? Oh, well, I don't write, all that sort of thing. So this hit us at exactly the same time as our contractual obligation to produce a second album.
Right. So,
and we'd exhausted all our material on the first album. And so when the time had come for the second album, we literally had nothing. A couple of the guys managed to go away and do a couple of arrangements of some songs and even write a couple of pieces. When we ended up with half an album, it seemed like I was the only one who was able to work with Peter Hall and get that Tempest score going. But up to that point, I hadn't written a note of music.
Really?
I'd done bits of arranging. I say up to that point. I mean, I was still 19.
Yeah.
So, I'd done bits of arranging and, I'd started pieces of music, but never finished them. But this was, harsh deadlines, immovable deadlines, a different world altogether. So I wrote a long track for the second album, 20-minute track, which was very much in the same style as the music for The Tempest.
Right.
But, I was on a wing and a prayer the whole time because, I just hadn't written anything before. But the fear factor made it happen.
Yeah. Amazing what adrenaline can do.
Yeah. So, I'll say here and now, even though I went on and actually made more money in a decade writing commercial music, shortly after that time, made more money in a decade than I would have made probably in an entire career of playing the clarinet. It wasn't till I was 10 years into composing that I would even allow anyone to call me a composer. I signed with a production house and agency called Airedale.
Yep.
And at that point, bless them, they called all their composers writers. Oh, yeah, he's an Airedale writer. Oh, he's an Airedale writer, so on. But, as far as I was concerned, I was an instrumentalist who was getting away with writing some stuff. And, it's very different now. Anybody who's a composer, anybody who's, managed to create a few minutes of something is suddenly a composer. Very different world. But it was great for me because, all the big composers were in America at that point, and there wasn't that much going on in Britain. I mean, you could count the names of the top British film composers pretty much on one hand.
Yeah.
At that stage, and anyone who had a bit of experience of actual orchestration, bit of conducting, ticked a few boxes, covered a few bases, would tend to get noticed. And I won't say I had the playing field to myself for a while, but there wasn't a lot of competition about it. I mean, it's so different now.
Yeah.
I mean, there are hundreds of composers out there with their portfolios plying their trade in the media industry.
Even then, Richard, that even Barry Gray had retired at that point, hadn't he? Because he was sort of retired to Guernsey lobby playing by 1980, maybe?
Yes, it probably was pretty much at that stage. And then, he had his own world.
Yeah.
That he was the population of one in, and he was. No one was ever going to compete with him, and he was never going to compete with anyone else. True. So he didn't really show up on the radar. He was just Barry Gray, and he did all that stuff. Yeah. And as we know, he did it all brilliantly. I mean, it probably would have been a slightly different world if he'd been in London, saying, all right, well, I've done Supercar, Fireball, XL5, Stingray, Thunderbirds, blah. Now I'm going to do a James Bond film or whatever. I mean, because he would have been right up there.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been on a par with John Barry. And, when you say John Barry, that there wasn't really, there were other film composers. But who were you going to give a Bond movie to?
Yeah.
If it wasn't John Barry. I mean, Barry Gray could have done it. But I can't really say that I'd be able to name anyone else that you'd entrust a Bond film to.
No.
So, those were great times. And I guess, I was really thrilled that people wanted to commission me to write music, wanted to hear what I was writing. No one was more surprised than myself that, I'd actually become by default a professional composer. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that helped me out was the fact that, we're looking at the pre-PC era here. And I know that if, for example, if Ford wanted a commercial for their latest car, they would go to their advertising agency would contact a firm like Airedale and say, right, we want a great theme for our new ads, but, we'd like to choose from about 4 or 5, if we may. And they'd throw in a budget of, what would have been a lot of money in those days for demos, a couple of £1,000. And 4 or 5 composers would go away and write a demo for the new Ford Escort or whatever it was. And then they'd book a drummer, a bass player, an organist, a vocalist maybe, lead guitar for a day. And one by one, these composers would come in and have their demos recorded. I'd found a sort of studio that I could work in and store my instruments at, and even do a deal on downtime with. And I gradually, I was just making enough money that I could start. I didn't spend any money on anything else. So I started to collect instruments. I had guitars, I had keyboards, had percussion instruments, good collection of woodwinds and some weird instruments. So I could go into these places and record demos where I could play everything myself. Round about this time, it was the era of Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. And, it was just a thing, to layer up recordings, and I could do all that stuff, and I could produce really, really quite glossy and impressive demos, some of which ended up just going to be used as the track that went on air. And I don't think it was so much that I had a special type of creativity. It's just I had a bunch of instruments that I could play. And I thought, well, what can I do there? Well, I'll play a bit of recorder on that. And somebody would say, well, who would have thought of putting a recorder on a car ad? Well, that's all I had. Someone else might have, put a violin on it. I don't play the violin. So I just ended up producing some pretty quirky and unusual tracks. And, in those days, who at the age of 22, 23 doesn't have a huge amount of energy. There was a lot of energy going into the tracks I was making. So I guess all that turned into the idea that I had my own voice. I was distinctive, and and that brought directors and producers knocking on my door. Very fortunate for me, really.
Yeah.
So that's the point where I said, yeah, playing is always going to be a part of the sort of rounded nature of my musical life. But what I do to pay the mortgage is write music. Yeah. And it's remained that way ever since.
Nice.
What a lovely man.
Yes. How interesting.
That is most of the comic book origin story of Richard Harvey, the composer and multi-instrumentalist.
I like it.
Rather lovely it was too. We had such a nice chat, and we could have gone on for a load of time. So more next week, Richard Harvey Part 2.
Brilliant.
And we should add, listeners, Podsterons.
Yeah.
Richard has been nominated for the Classic FM Hall of Fame.
Oh.
And if you would like to support his nomination to make sure he's put there forever, then you can go to halloffame.classicfm.com/2021. We'll add the link in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Type in Richard Harvey and cast your vote. Let's show the power of the Podsterons by making sure Richard is put into the Hall of Fame forever.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. I'll put that link on our Facebook group as well, so our Podsterons can vote there. Well, good luck, Richard. That sounds brilliant.
Yep.
Nicely done. Yeah.
More
so
next
part
week.
2 next week.
Yep.
Love it. Now, Jamie, you're on Twitter, aren't you?
I've heard of it. I think I may be, yes.
I'm on Twitter,
Yes.
and so is Chris Dale. I'm at Richard N. James. You're at...
I'm Jamie Anderson.
Yes, and Chris Dale, of course, at Chris Dalek. Now, on Twitter, Samira Ahmed, a previous guest here on the podcast.
And a future one.
Indeed. Posted a picture of Brian Blessed, who was interviewed recently, as many people have been, in front of his bookcase.
Ah, yes.
And she tweeted, I rather love that of all the things Brian Blessed could choose from, a Space 1999 annual takes pride of place on his dresser.
Nice.
How cool is that? Isn't that good?
Yeah, I saw the picture. It's rather lovely that he's got that up there.
Yeah.
Do you think he has that all the time, or has he just gone, this will be
Here's
interesting?
something for the... Yeah, well, either way, it's quite cool, isn't it?
It is nice.
If it's there all the time, that's great. And if he made it a special thing for any fans out there, that's a great thing too.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah, lovely. Lost in Transition. My listening pleasure for this week, going to and from work, will be Monday, the Gerry Anderson Podcast. Tuesday, The Avengers, John Steed and Mrs. Peel, a random 1970s Springbok radio version from my friend's collection. Sounds interesting.
We're in good
doesn't it?
company.
Yeah, Jeff Owen tweeted, I'm really enjoying the Secret Service on BritBox myself now, but curious, how many different times did they build different sized sets for the scenes with Matthew? And how big was the smallest Matthew puppet?
Ooh.
Any ideas?
I thought they only used Matthew, the puppet, as a puppet, and he was in live action settings, which made him look small. I haven't watched Secret Service recently enough to give you any further analysis, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But Chris Randomiser Dale will be on the case, I'm sure, to correct me if I'm incorrect there.
Great. And finally, on Twitter, Justin Fisher tweeted, I'm loving the podcast. I only just found them through Jamie being on the Benji and Nick show, whatever that is. But he says, I'm only on pod 18, and as fast as I try to catch up, they're disappearing off Spotify. I missed pod 2 completely.
Oh.
Really?
Gosh, I wonder if that's Spotify just having a 120 podcast limit. I guess so.
Oh.
So,
gosh.
well, I mean, they're all at gerryandersonpodcast.com if you want to get them there, and you can't get them on Spotify. So just head that way.
But if Justin is still on pod 18, then he's not going to hear that message for another year and a half, is he?
Can you email him or something?
I'll try. Yeah, great.
Perfect.
There we are, all for now, but don't forget, you can simply hashtag us Gerry Anderson Podcast, tag me, Richard and James, him, I'm Jamie Anderson, him, there he goes, Chris, yay! He's doing a loop-the-loop, that's amazing, and a barrel roll, yes!
In the design for that.
That's Chris Dalek. Yeah, and we'll see your tweets, and I'll read them out next time.
Gosh. Well, he's finished his manoeuvring, it seems, and done a bit of a belly flop landing, so I guess that means he's here for his...
He's failed. Oh.
Well, no, he's only trying to get his provisional, so I think he'll probably be all right.
I see.
He certainly scared the instructor into it. But no, Chris has made his sort of crash landing to come and join us for the Randomiser, where he randomly watches a random Gerry Anderson episode and randomly says random things about that episode with his witty and analytical hat on. So, yes, he appears to have put that on his head now. So, Chris, over to you for your witty and analytical Randomiser.
Easy for you to say.
Welcome to Koala Base.
Well, thank you, Major Stone. I'm not quite sure why we're here, but...
The recruits are looking forward to your lectures.
Ah, yes, my lectures. Yes, well, I'm sure they'll be, quite interesting. Probably.
And what exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, just that, my friend Marina here will be giving most of those, actually. Oh, don't look so worried, Marina. There's nothing to it, really. It's all done in PowerPoint these days anyway.
Shall we get over to the lecture room?
Absolutely, but before we can give a lecture, we need to have something to lecture about.
I hate to say this, but I feel I must agree with you.
Good. So, if you'd like to press the button on the randomizer here, that's it.
Nothing to worry about.
And let's see what we land on today.
I'm sure you'd like Captain Scarlet.
Well, we have had both versions of him quite recently. Still, I wouldn't say no.
Out of the question.
Indeed. Yes, the printout has given us... Well, it was close, but it's not quite there. And also, it's another clip show episode.
I'll order a complete investigation, of course. But it looks like sabotage.
Oh, I don't know. As clip shows go, it's not the worst.
Tell me.
Okay, well, here's the birthday.
Joe 90. Well, he could be our man.
Oh, well, he's always been mine. So, welcome back to good old Joe 90 on the Randomiser, and in the words of good old Mr. Bumbledrop, this is the Joe 90 clip show episode. Every Anderson show had a clip show episode, well, at least through the Super Mario Nation era, more or less, and this is Joe 90's. Yep, Joe's got out of bed. Looks like an important day. He's marked it on his calendar, but unfortunately his dad has just left early.
Hello, Joe. You're up bright and early.
Luckily, Mrs. Harris is here.
Where's Dad gone?
He had to go up to town. Said he'd be back late.
Oh, dear.
Are there any letters or anything for me today?
Letters?
For you?
Now go and get dressed, Joe, and I'll get you breakfast.
Oh, no. Everyone's forgotten.
Isn't it? I've just remembered. It's your birthday, Joe. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. And I haven't even got a card.
Oh.
I forgot all about it.
Very dangerous.
Right. Looks like everyone forgot.
Yeah, very dangerous to tell a little boy who regularly uses, like, high-tech tanks and rocket launchers and rifles and such that you forgot his birthday. But, I mean, that right there is probably the one moment where this show actually becomes what I think a lot of people I was going to say misexpect it to be, but that's not right. Where it's like, that's a very kid show trope. Oh, they all forgot his birthday. What a shame. This being a clip show episode, I am unlikely to be talking over the clips themselves all that much, particularly as in this episode, all three come from episodes we haven't yet seen on the Randomiser. So I shall only make comments on those sections if something comes up that, well, is relevant to this episode specifically, rather than that old episode as it will be when we eventually get around to see it. For the meantime, let's marvel at the wonderful Joe 90 opening title sequence and gorgeous Barry Gray main theme again, because I don't think I'm going to find a whole lot to say about this. I mean, it's a clip show, you know, and with the sort of, you know, once you put the clips aside, it's only really the enjoyment you can get out of it is limited to how much you're enjoying the framing device or the selection of old clips that they pull up. And this episode, I think, does a fair job of both, actually. The choice of episodes are pretty good. You know, if I was going to choose exciting moments from this show, 3 episodes of clips, I would probably go for the 3 they've chosen here. It's Sunday the 7th, according to Joe's calendar.
All right, Dad.
We don't know what month that is. It's now quarter to 5, so Joe really has been left on his own for most of the day. No friends.
Come in, Joe.
Here they are, though.
Surprise, surprise!
Dad! Uncle Sam! Mr. Weston! You didn't forget!
Happy birthday, Joe! Happy birthday!
So Joe's dad drove seemingly 8 hours up to London.
Joe, you've reached double figures.
It never normally takes that long.
10 years old. This past 12 months has gone so fast, and
I love their party hats.
and a lot has happened.
You can say that again, Chief.
This past 12 months has gone so fast, and...
no. Okay, Chief. We get it.
Although, don't you normally get paper hats from Crackers?
YN owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. You certainly have been our most special agent.
And all the other 89 are just crying into their beer every single night that they don't measure up to you. They all went off for training, years of intensive work to become good agents, and you beat them all. Anyway, we're now in the most special agent section of the flashbacks.
Joe's first assignment. File number 90.
Which is a slightly odd clip, only ever so slightly odd clip to pull up.
242.
This was Shane Weston's pitch to get Joe to join the organisation.
We have nothing equal to it in the West.
With a scenario that doesn't actually play out for real. This is just a story that he is telling. So basically, and this is something I find quite fun with clip shows, is...
question.
You're seeing the clips, but you have to remember that these are people in the real world of these particular shows recounting these stories. So now Mac has basically just said, hey Shane, remember that time you told us a story that didn't actually happen?
How we would do it.
That was really good. I also love that... well, firstly, Joe's been left on his own for 8 solid hours. I don't know what Mac was doing for the rest of the time. It never normally takes that long to get to London, but... clearly, none of his school friends have got in touch or wanted to hang out with him or do anything on his 10th birthday. Instead, he's waiting for his government handlers to come and share his birthday with him. It just sort of reinforces this horrible notion with this show that
First time
WIN have essentially bought Joe. They own him, lock, stock and barrel.
The details of the
poor old Joe.
War II are a closely guarded secret. And since you are all experts on aviation, with one notable exception... Where is he? Professor McLean, where is your boy?
And going back to my own first experience of this episode, I clearly remember this was the very first episode of Joe 90 I ever recorded in full. And it's a different era, that period of the early 90s where you couldn't necessarily, many people didn't have the money to go out and buy the official video releases. They were reliant on recording odd episodes off TV when they happened to be on.
Loud and clear.
So it gets me thinking about the appeal of clip show episodes back in the 60s to kids who...
They're about 200 miles below.
They were operating under the assumption that they would never see any of these shows again. Oh, here's a chance to relive some of the best moments. This is very welcome. And it's kind of similar for my generation in the early 90s. I certainly didn't have the money to afford everything. Far from it, in fact. So making do with an odd episode here or there, it almost didn't matter what you recorded, so long as you recorded something. You had an episode to watch. And when I managed to get the birthday and realised that it was a selection of clips, I think actually, despite our sort of weariness of clip show episodes these days, I was kind of grateful to have like a best bits compilation from these 3 episodes.
They can't really stop me now, Sam. They may try ground-to-air missiles.
But yes, back in the VHS era, particularly you would go into shops and you'd see a whole VHS collection of your favourite show, and it's like, 2 or 4 episodes per tape, and you've got enough money to buy one. The agony of that choice, of looking at that wall of, whether it was Anderson tapes or Star Trek tapes or Doctor Who tapes or whatever, what are you going to select and keep forever? And these days you can put the same amount of money down for the complete series of Joe 90 on DVD and have everything. Whereas, that's what, $14.99 to get Joe 90 on DVD complete these days, whereas back in the day it was $10.99 up to $12.99 for a VHS containing 4 episodes. I'm not going to lie, I did rewatch this episode from my TV recording, and later from an ex-rental copy from the library. The tape had Mission X-41.
Although it was only a story, you made it sound so real.
Test Flight and See You Down There, and this one.
I had my doubts about letting Joe work for World Intelligence.
Anyway.
You certainly did, Mac. I was still trying to convince you right up to Joe's first real assignment.
What was that, Uncle Sam?
Oh, don't tell me you've forgotten, Joe. Have another piece of cake and I'll...
I like that as well as we move into clips from Hijacked. For one thing, Joe doesn't remember what actually counted as the first real assignment. Now, you might think that's just because...
To me, Sam.
I don't know, maybe the big rat has melted his brain by this point. He doesn't know what day it is. But also this Hijacked episode here. This was the second episode made, but it was not the second episode shown. And I've always wondered if that little mention of first real assignment was a subtle nod to the differences between production order and broadcast order on these shows. In broadcast order, the second episode was Most Special Astronaut, which is the first one I saw, and I kind of find it amusing that Most Special Astronaut, obviously by the title you can assume Joe goes into space. But if you stick with broadcast order here, Sam's comment of this Hijacked was your first real assignment. That time you went into space. That was the piffling load of nonsense. That doesn't really count. Well, you just first 9-year-old boy in space. That's nothing. Do that all the time.
Intruder in Area 4.
Intruder in Area 4.
So as well as it being an Anderson trope, the clip show episode, also birthdays are something that crop up fairly regularly. It's not something you actually register, but I would say at least half the shows have a birthday moment in them. Let's see if I can get them all. We have this, obviously. We have...
Joe should have reported it.
It was going to be Alan's birthday in Attack of the Alligators. I think tomorrow was going to be his birthday. Tintin brought him the alligator that he didn't want.
This is the intruder.
Terrahawks, we have Zero's Maid Day, and Tiger's birthday in... what's that thing with the wig in the desert firing at stuff?
What a name.
The Midas Touch. And Hero's birthday in number 1 Seed. We have...
Interesting.
What else is there?
Gregson.
Yes.
Harry Rule's birthday, I think, in an episode of The Protectors called The Chase.
Come with me.
Mike Mercury in Supercar Day Time Stood Still.
Can I have my case?
Tex Tucker, did he have... Was there an episode for Feather Falls Happy Birthday? I want to say there's an episode of Torchy called Torchy's Birthday. That may have been a nightmare I had. Does that cover everything? I don't know if there's anything in Lavender Castle. I can't think of anything in any other shows.
You won't need them.
There's quite a few birthdays there to have.
Joe 90.
And I believe several of those did also play the everyone's forgotten about my birthday, but not really card.
In the boots of a car.
Listen, Joe, do you have your glasses?
So it's a birthday episode and a clip show episode. It's 2 Anderson tropes in one, aren't we lucky?
I've got a message from Coletti. Dispose of the boy.
It'll be a pleasure.
But the selection of these clips is far superior to... what was the last clip show we covered? I think it might have been The Inquisition from Captain Scarlet, where it was very often Captain Blue started telling a story, and either he got bored and just didn't finish it, or he needed a flashback within the flashback to make sense of what was going on. But these 3 clips from Joe here are very well used in this episode.
Ready for shipment early next week.
Now we have Joe sneaking up on...
Mark 17 automatic, right?
Naughty old gunrunner Mario Coletti.
150 Brenner submachine gun.
And again, I just keep thinking of Joe, Sam, Mac and Shane in the real world sat around this birthday party table saying, "Hey Joe, remember that time you went up against that ruthless gunrunner and almost got your head blown off? That was fun." More cherry aid.
I'm leaving for Geneva tonight.
Especially this very nasty shot of Joe getting his hand karate chopped by Coletti as he reaches for his glasses, and you see the blood as that desk lamp smashes down on his fingers.
We can't just sit here, Sam. Something's obviously wrong.
Oh, you're right. Let's go.
And that's another fun part of the imagining what's going on around the table. Then Mac and I, well, we were just sat there fretting for quite a lot of this, Joe.
All right, Coletti. I'm coming to get you.
But here we're building up to...
One left, Coletti. It's just you.
Well, this is a recap of one of the darkest moments of the series, Joe's absolute murder of Mario Coletti here. Although I kind of get that it's...
Come on!
You know, he kind of did what he had to do in order to survive. But in the context of a child's birthday party, recounting the events that we're about to see...
There must be a hidden entrance someplace.
...is pretty darn grim.
Come on out!
Here we go. Joe's going for the grenade.
Over here, Coletti.
Throws it. Say, Joe, remember that time you murdered a gunrunner with a hand grenade? I would have stuffed it down his trousers if I could have got closer, Uncle Sam. Aha, that's my boy. More cake.
That assignment really showed what an asset you could be to WIN, Joe.
Yes, it was exciting, all right, Uncle Sam.
I murdered an awful lot of people.
Which assignment sticks in your memory?
Come on, Professor.
Well, I don't really know. There's been so many.
Oh, come on, Dad.
Well, Joe has flown jet planes at hypersonic speeds, but the one that I remember involved him in a much slower method of transport. In fact, trying to hurry could have led to disaster.
And here we are in recap. Our third and final recap for this episode is of Colonel McLean, which is another favourite episode of mine. Again, we haven't gotten to that one yet, so I'm not going to talk about this episode in too much detail.
Keep up your speed, Johnson. You're falling behind.
Keep up your speed, Johnson. You'll kill us all.
I also like that this actually does feel, oddly enough, like a final episode, despite it being a clip show. I don't know, just the fact that Joe is now a year older. It feels, oddly enough, like the series has developed just a little bit, just by the passing of that number 9 up to 10. I don't know what it is, but
landslide.
There are Anderson shows where I feel you need a definite final ending, particularly Scarlet, particularly UFO, particularly 1999. But this, you know, Joe 90 and Thunderbirds as well, to a certain extent, don't really need an ending that wraps up the story, because there isn't really a story as such to wrap up or conclude.
You all right, Johnson? Yes, but... Oh, that's it. I've had enough. This is as far as I go. He's got a point, sir. That road's completely blocked. We'll never clear it.
We'll try another way, Sergeant, as soon as it's light. All right, Johnson, attach the second cable. The sergeant's next.
Right.
So now we're doing the long haul up the side of the cliff with the explosives trucks tied to a tree.
Cable, Johnson.
It's ready.
And driving up the side of the mountain. I've always enjoyed this sequence. Again, we will get to more detail on this sequence whenever we actually land on the episode Colonel McLean itself. But until then, we're about to come up, as the sergeant heads on up the cliff in his explosives truck, we're about to come on yet another moment that really makes no sense when recapped at a child's birthday party.
The tree, look!
Get out of there, Sergeant!
Sarge, jump!
Get clear! The cable's going!
Sarge! Sarge!
Because not only is, I find this one of the most emotionally affecting moments of the whole series. Random accidental death of a guest character just through sheer bad luck, and then that shot of Joe and Johnson standing on the cliff.
There's nothing we can do here.
But Mac has just recounted that event within the context of a child's birthday party. It's like, hey, remember when that good innocent man who was pretty likeable, remember when he died completely accidentally and was blown to bits? Oh, fun. More trifle?
The pressure drop at an altitude over 5,000 feet will detonate them in minutes.
I understand, Sam. Out. We've got to get this truck down below 5,000 feet. Hold on.
And what I like about this episode as well is that the recaps, obviously they cut a lot of material. I imagine these are like 5 or 6 minutes each. But you don't really feel that. Again, you didn't feel it with Thunderbirds, I guess because they had so much more time to incorporate more clips. But in some episodes, particularly where the episodes are not well selected, like with Stingray and like with Scarlet, you really feel the gaps. The scissors have been extensively taken to certain episodes. But here, this all works fine. We have as much recap as we really need to follow the events of this episode perfectly. I mean, just there I waffled over the reveal of the saboteur at the base who sabotaged these trucks. You know, in this recap, we don't see him. We don't even need to see him, really.
Vibrational detonated.
The pressure will, if we don't get down.
We can just be told that's what he did. This is the threat. And here we are. Joe has plunged off the cliff. Just in time before the canisters explode.
We're safe now.
Well, Joe, fill up your glass.
With what?
I'd like to propose a toast.
What are they drinking?
To the World Intelligence Network.
It is interesting to see what they've got on the table. They've got one pineapple and an absolute brick of a cake.
Give you WIN's most special agent, Joe 90. Joe 90. Happy birthday.
While the heads of the World Intelligence Network are wasting their time with this, various countries have been invaded and overthrown.
Happy birthday, Joe 90.
But it's worth it for this ending.
Day to you.
And the voice actors throwing themselves into the singing as well. Do you think any of the other WIN agents get birthday parties thrown for them like this? Oh well, who knows? Because that was, in most orders, that's the final episode of Joe 90, the birthday. And I think by this point, you just come to expect that the series is going to end with a clip show. And it's, Stingray did, first series of Thunderbirds did, Scarlet did. So this is no surprise. But I am always quite pleasantly surprised that this one is as enjoyable as it is. And I don't think that's just my overriding love for Joe 90 talking there, because, I have the same love for Scarlet and Stingray, but I'm aware that their clip shows aren't up to the standard of this one and also Thunderbirds. It's a bit, kid showy. Oh, they forgot my birthday, and also raises some more questions about Joe's lack of friends and the seeming ownership of him by WIN. But aside from that, some really well selected clips. I think if you were gonna you're gonna end the series with a clip show, it was just standard at this point, I think this is probably the best you could get from Joe 90 as a clip show. I've always really enjoyed this one, have done since I saw it around, it was New Year's sometime in 1997, I believe, on the BBC. Bye bye, Joe.
Oh, what
Jamie.
a treat. What a treat.
Oh,
you know
Joe
how
90,
much
you
I
love it. Love it when Joe 90 comes up, don't you?
So fond of that series.
Look at your little face.
Yeah. Anyway, let's hope for something different next week, just for variety, not because I've got any particular vendetta against a fictional 9-year-old boy. Sort of though.
Jamie, would you rather Joe 90 hadn't happened at all?
Would
the Gerry Anderson legacy have missed anything if Joe 90 hadn't happened, in your opinion?
I mean, a cool theme tune.
Ah, sure. And those opening credits.
No, I'm less wowed by the opening credits. Flashy, spinny, meh.
Yeah.
But the music. And that then means in turn that I would have missed out on doing the Joe 90 dance at a convention with Lee Sullivan. So, yeah,
True.
okay, fair enough. I think that alone is worth it for Joe having existed. So, there's one episode that I like so far. So,
well, there we are. We've found something, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, the birthday is not one to add to that
list.
It's
not it. No, sure.
Yeah,
fair enough.
One so far. Anyway, look, that's the end of the Gerry Anderson podcast and the end of the Joe 90 bit. Thank goodness. I'm sure you'll all be breathing a sigh of relief. Email us, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Make sure you're subscribed and do us a review or a rating, also known as a revating. Ideally positive if you don't possibly mind. That would be great. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll be back for pod 142 with more Richard Harvey and more stuff and chat and nonsense, won't we?
I guess we will, yeah.
Right, well, what, should we just go?
Let's just go.
Okay. See you next week, Podsterons. Goodbye.
Bye.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
Do you know what we haven't done for a while, Richard?
Oh, what's that?
We have not looked at the ratings and the reviews.
No, why is that?
Probably because they haven't been great recently. Shall I have a look now and have a look at the most recent one?
Okay. That's a bit of a lottery, isn't it?
I mean, we've got 257 ratings and the average is 5 stars, so that's lovely. We're very grateful for that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. We've got one from the 8th of January.
Okay.
Not a little while ago.
Yeah, fine. A few weeks, yeah.
So this is from Potsy S. 5 stars. Simply FAB. And Potsy S says, "This podcast is my happy place and the best thing about a Monday morning. Every pod keeps you up to date on the latest Gerry Anderson news, gives you fab facts and excellent interviews. The hosts, Jamie and Richard, are just brilliant, and Christelle's randomiser at the end is genius. If you're a Gerry Anderson fan, then you need to check out this podcast. Just a warning, though.
Oh, no.
Once you
Richard
start
James
listening,
is in it.
No, Joe 90's in it. No, once you start listening, you won't be able to stop. It's that addictive. Isn't that a lovely review? Thank you, Potsy S, whoever
really
you are.
Nice. Yes, I've never been someone's happy place before.
I know. Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there?
Is that a bit like someone's warm place?
I think we may be straying into dangerous territory here. Anyway, thank you, Potsy. We're very grateful for your lovely review. If you'd like to be read out in a future podcast, then you can do that by, leaving us a review. Probably a good one, or a comically bad one. One of the two. Let's go to the former, shall we?
Podcast itself.
Yeah, all right, Richard. Thank you for that. I think it's time we left. Goodbye.
All right, bye.
You have been listening to the Gerry Anderson Podcast. Wasn't it fun?
You have been listening to an Anderson Entertainment production.